Hi there, and welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast. My name's Chris Dabbs, and I'm your host today. And today we are absolutely honoured to have Daniel J. Donoghue with us, who's basically going to be talking to us about his book, A Fortunate Son and Other Stories. So why don't we just get straight into it and welcome you, Dan. How are you doing? It's lovely to meet you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and it's great to meet you as well.
Oh, thanks very much. No, it's always good to do these, and I can't wait to find out a bit more about obviously the book. So let's get straight into our first question then. A Fortunate Son and Other Stories. Well, it spans decades of your life and writing, doesn't it? I mean, what inspired you to bring these stories together into just one collection?
The stories were about various times in my life and what I was experiencing during those times. I felt the stories tied together and were best offered up as a collection, so that readers could experience the stories as a snapshot in time tied together. Taken together, I hope it offers readers how we can progress over time and lead to the next chapter of our lives.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think this is the thing, isn't it, right? Where the book, the title, A Fortunate Son, kind of really suggests both gratitude and reflection. What does that mean personally to you then? And how does it tie into the themes of the book?
Well, the reflection aspect gave me the opportunity to experience my life for a second time. You go through life built on your experiences and issues. Writing about them gives me the chance to reflect on the decisions I made and giving me the opportunity to relive those times in my life and see how the decisions affected me for the better or worse. With fiction, I get the opportunity to correct my mistakes. The gratitude I feel is for God and all that He has given me over my life. Whatever talent I have, whether writing or anything else, comes from Him.
So I see what you mean then. So you've mentioned some stories and how things have happened in your life and in your personal experience then. So how do you balance then fiction, which you mentioned earlier on just then, when shaping these narratives? Because that can be quite tricky, can't it?
Yes, it can. It's a fine line. The truth comes obviously from the experiences, feelings, and observations that have occurred over time. Turning them into fiction is based on how I deal with those truths. Nothing I write is based solely on autobiography. It's taking those snapshots of my observations and envisioning what might have happened to these characters before and after the situation described.
Okay, I get you. That's quite interesting then. So when you're writing, it seems to capture both tenderness and turmoil, which again is tricky. So tell us how you approach writing about pain or vulnerability in a way that connects with readers, that isn't just about telling us something, but how it actually turns into some sort of emotion for us.
Well, in my life, the most effective way I've dealt with pain and vulnerability is through writing about it. And that's been the outlet for me. It really isn't much of a difference between that and seeing a therapist.
Oh, right. Okay. So that's how you deal with it then. So instead of seeing a therapist or instead of talking to other people, or what you're doing is, what do they call it? Cathartic, isn't it? So when you're sitting there and
exactly,
you're writing and and so you found that that's really helped you.
Oh, absolutely. It's been
sorry,
go ahead.
No, you please go ahead. We're going to hear about you, not me.
So cathartic's a good word. I feel I can better deal with those two things, pain and vulnerability, by reflecting on them, as opposed to speaking about them, to reflect on them and write and edit. It's important to be able to edit what you've experienced. But cathartic's a good word.
So tell us about tell us something about some of the stories you have in the book. How have you sort of looked at some of these painful times? Have you sort of like melded them together with the fiction?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't. The bandwidth was running a little low.
No, that's okay. Now, I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit about one of the stories that you've written about, which is where you've melded fiction and telling how it was for you. It had a hurtful time or some sort of emotional time, so that readers get an idea of how listeners rather, get an idea of how you've approached this.
The title story, A Fortunate Son, I've always been concerned about the homeless situation in this country. And when I read an article about this Black Vietnam veteran in a wheelchair, homeless, living near the beach. It really struck, and he was attacked by a teenager, stabbed multiple times, taken to the hospital. And it just opened up something inside of me when I read the article. And like with most of my stories, based on an observation, I try to put together what their life might have been like before the incident and then after the incident.
So what led that soldier or that serviceman into that position? In other words, being in a wheelchair and being homeless. So you're kind of like, well, that's what you mean. You're built up a history for that person, or not for that person, but for the person that he could be, I guess, in fiction.
He served in Vietnam, was decorated, had a Purple Heart. On the side of his wheelchair, he had his Purple Heart hanging and a American flag. And the teenager who attacked him accused him of being a liar, being fake, and I just couldn't imagine what this man's life must have been like, to be born and have kind of a challenging childhood, or this is the way I wrote the story, to have a kind of a challenging childhood, serving in Vietnam, have his leg blown up, coming back to the States, unable to walk. And, his decision to, rather than go home, but to stay out in California on the beach, was really something I put together because I wanted to show this man who also had a Bible in his wheelchair belongings, how he stayed out there to, start life over again and remain faithful, to his God and to his life.
So yeah, exactly. How did he get that strength to do that? Yes, right.
Yes.
To
and it's faithful. It's faith, of course.
Well, yeah, exactly. But we always think that, don't we? But it must be really tough when you're in a position like that. When everything seems to be against you, and you just draw on your faith. It's an amazing thing, really. And I think that's the thing. Your stories, they tend to touch on universal experiences, don't they? So you've mentioned love, loss, family, and regret. But which of those themes really means the most to you? And why though? So why are they so important to you?
It's actually all four of those. They're intertwined together. One experience touches the others. I don't write stories that deal with just one of those things. I don't sit down to write stories based on a singular theme. And I hope that comes across to readers.
Interesting. But you do actually look at military life, don't you, quite often? You mentioned that this homeless vet. I mean, how has your own experience then shaped the way that you write about service and the lasting impact it has on people?
Well, I joined the Navy at 22 at a time when I needed direction in my life. I was pretty much out of control, and I knew I needed to get more in charge of my circumstances. The Navy, from boot camp on, instilled moral and physical guidance to me. I needed the discipline of the Navy to give me a leg up on my future. From the mission we had in Beirut to the year I spent tasked to the Merchant Marines, I had experiences that I never dreamed of. I met and worked with people I never would have met otherwise. I experienced things that I never would have experienced otherwise. Next to marrying my wife, the Navy changed my life, had the biggest impact on my life.
That's really good to hear. And I think a lot of people really helps them to things I'd wish I'd done. I think it's great. But you also write about mental illness. So what motivates you to kind of, talk about that subject? Because a lot of people steer from it, right? And what do you hope that readers will take away from what you've written about mental illness?
I have bipolar disorder, so mental illness has been a personal issue for me. I volunteered at a homeless shelter for a while, and the overwhelming issue with people dealing with mental health issues without any support or services. Over the last few years, the stigma of having a mental illness has been reduced, which is a great thing. We need to treat mental illness just as we do physical ailments. So I hope people who read these stories would develop an understanding and sympathy for those who need our help.
That's good. And again, another great message, Dan. I think, it's really fortunate that things have changed in the last few years regarding mental. So I get that. And I mean, talking about personal issues as well. It seems that many of your stories, you've rooted them in quite ordinary settings, haven't you? Bars, suburban homes, quiet streets. But, you're talking about the emotions that are happening in ordinary places, right? In the everyday kind of life, because everyone says about living in the burbs, don't they? And it's just like boring, but obviously, you don't think so.
Right. Well, to me, the everyday experiences that we have, no matter how minor, have just as much an impact on our lives as the major events. It is not only the major decisions we make that determine our future, but the decisions we make on a daily basis.
Such as what? Going to work, not going to work, getting a new job, those sorts of things?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. You can make a decision to I'm trying to think of a good example, but you can make a small decision about a friend or a conversation or something that you don't consider to be a big deal, but it could have an impact on the other person, and it could change certain things about your life, certain event, direction of your life. It doesn't have to be a big decision like whether I should join the military or whether I should get married. Those obviously are major decisions, but the smaller decisions can play just as much a part in our fate.
That's true, isn't it? It's true. I mean, it could be as simple as getting a coffee, going to the coffee shop and meeting up with someone you haven't seen for ages, right? Or it could be anything like that. It could be life-changing without you even realizing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the stories, "The Song Is Over," is about a quiet couple in a coffee shop, and it looks. I was actually in a restaurant when I saw this kind of thing, and it looked like a couple just having a lunch, but you could see the conversation got a little bit more serious, or I imagined it becoming a little more serious, and that was a simple event. It's just a lunch, going out to lunch.
So exactly, and you never know what could happen, do you? And I think as an author, that's where your skill comes in, isn't it? Really being able to look at that and then extrapolate and be able to draw on it to create stories. And really, I've seen that your writing is described as lyrical and precise as well at the same time, which is some feat, right? So what's your process then for crafting language that feels both poetic and authentic?
To explain, how I craft my prose and put together the writing. It's just something, within me, something that I feel. And with God's help, it's something that comes natural to me.
Lucky you, Dan. That's all I could say.
Yeah.
Lucky you. Oh, that's so nice. So nice to hear, and it is very difficult for some. I couldn't do the things that you do. It just sounds so great. But when you also write across decades, you must have brought moments of thinking about what happened in the past, and it must have been kind of like a self-discovery journey, really. I mean, how did revisiting older works or memories affect you personally? I mean, did it bring up? I mean, hopefully, I'm thinking that there were good things that you thought about as well as the bad things.
Right. Well, from the stories I wrote decades ago to the last one, A Fortunate Son, each of them has given me the opportunity to look deep within myself and discover new aspects in my life, particularly those first stories that I wrote. As I go back and edit them, I remember something else about myself and my life. Editing them takes me back to a time, to those experiences, and gives me the opportunity to relive them and look at them in a new light. Also, as I go over them again, I bring my current state of mind to the past mindsets that I had when I originally wrote the stories.
Which is quite interesting then. And how have you found that your mind has changed over time then with your writing? I mean, have you come to conclusions that you wouldn't have come to when your younger self wrote them?
Certainly. I mean, the main thing is I've gotten more mature over the years. I wrote a lot of these stories when I was in my 20s. And, I had, I guess I was a typical 20-year-old. I had my different ideas at the time, my different thoughts at the time. But as I've matured, and I look back at those first stories, I feel like I revisit them for a second time.
And so are there any particular stories that you revisited that meant a lot to you, that really sort of, you were sort of shocked? Well, maybe not shocked, but you stopped and thought, wow, you really thought about that. So this gave you the opportunity to think like that.
Well, the two most challenging stories I've written are All Roads Lead to Here and A Reason for Everything, because they were at difficult periods of my life. The first one deals with a time when I was having issues with my mental illness. And the second one was a terrifying experience I had as a child when my father, who had left us years before, came and stood on a street near me as I was walking home. And I was shaken by this and was too young to put it in perspective.
And so how did your age help you to put that into perspective now then?
Well, actually, at the time itself, it was my mother who, I talked to about it, and I was very scared and very upset. And the title comes from A Reason for Everything, from what she was telling me about the experience.
So the experience, so you revisited that as an adult, is what you're saying, yeah? Did that, as a child, seeing that must have been, did you actually interact with your father at the time? Or
No, I just saw him. And he was standing a couple of blocks away from me, yeah.
Right. So that must have been very confusing for a young child then.
Yes.
So obviously you revisited that now, and what sort of other times of your life have you been able to revisit and I guess reconsider, is from what you're saying, really, isn't it?
Oh, reconsider. Trying to think of one of the stories that. Let me look at something real quick here.
It's always great to hear this, Dan. So don't worry. Yeah, fine.
Yeah. So I'd say Removing Salt from the Sea, which was a story when I was in the Merchant Marines about an older sailor who was retiring. At the time, I really didn't pay much attention to this man's life. He'd been a Merchant Marine for, 40 years, served on the Merchant Marine ship during the wars, but I never really took the time to reflect with him on his life. So I wrote this story kind of wishing that I'd had these conversations with him, at the time.
Quite a nice way, actually, to remember somebody, isn't it? So what sort of things did you write about?
Oh, about this guy? Yeah, well, he was very old and he was kind of frail, kind of short, kind of frail. And he had the toughest job on the ship, working in the boiler room. And it just amazed me how he was able first to do the job for so long and to have the personality that he did, because he was upbeat. He was an upbeat guy. A lot of times you look at people getting ready to retire and you think, oh, well, that's it for him. You know what I mean? But not in this case, not with this gentleman.
So he was 40 years in the Merchant Marines, right? And he was he was a stoker or worked in the boiler room all that time for 40 years.
I'm sure he had different jobs over the time, but when I was with him, that was his job. Yeah.
Right. He wasn't shoveling coal all the time, right?
No.
Can you imagine? But no, well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Doing the same job, being in the same kind of environment for 40 years like that is something quite amazing, really. And I guess that's one of the stories where you can look back and you can think, oh, wow, I wish that I had spoken to that man. I wish that I'd understood a bit more of his life. I think we all do that, don't we? There's always somebody like that who could be a really good mentor, perhaps, but we just kind of miss out on it. So it's nice to revisit that.
Right.
So is that the kind of thing that you hope readers will feel about reading A Fortunate Son and Other stories? How will they reflect upon their own lives? How do you hope that it affects them?
I would hope they get the idea that we are all the sum of our parts, so the different experiences we have and how we choose to deal with them, that we, with God's help, can deal with our crises and our everyday decisions and realize that our lives can change for the better.
So having faith is an important part of it.
Having faith is a very big part of my life, and I feel it's something that could help our world, help people individually, and help our world.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Rather than just thinking about ourselves, right? So it's about thinking about faith and thinking about our communities and all of that thing, right?
Right.
I understand what you mean. Brilliant. Well, listen, Dan, we're running out of time. So my final question for you, right? What advice have you got for aspiring writers, who want to tell deeply personal stories or emotionally honest stories, not just like write any old story, but to do what you've done, to look behind it and to feel the emotion and to feel the personal interest side of things. What advice would you give those people?
Well, I think there's kind of two nuggets for me, and I would say write about what you know and read the great writers. I grew up reading Hemingway, Steinbeck, and others of that generation, and I read them and reread them as a teenager and in my 20s. It was the great American period for writers. From The Grapes of Wrath to For Whom the Bell Tolls, the breadth and truths that they wrote about are timeless. And I think we can all, benefit from that. With writing about what you know, in my opinion, you need a kernel of truth to base the rest of the story on. I would imagine it very difficult to write fiction when you totally make it off your own imagination.
And there's no need to do that, as you say, because everyone has a life. Everyone's had some experience.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
As long as you start with that, yeah. It's like a grain of sand inside an oyster. I guess they grow into a pearl at some stage.
Right.
So,
right.
Dan, listen, it's a shame that we've run out of time, but it's been great talking to you. And I love the way that you've looked at things sort of like in an analytical way and then brought the emotion and everything else towards it. So listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the BrightWord Books Podcast and listening to Daniel J. Donoghue talk about his book, A Fortunate Son and Other Stories. Now, don't forget, it's available on Amazon, so make sure that you get out there and buy a copy. And, well, really, then we can really learn about what Dan has been talking about. In other words, looking at bringing your emotional self, but also looking back at your experiences and using faith to guide you through that. So, Dan, thank you very much for talking to us today. It's been really fascinating. And, well, hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Fantastic. Me too. Well, take care, Dan. See you soon.
Okay, bye.